The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Elena stirred honey into her tea. The house was quiet, too quiet for a place so big. She glanced at the clock. 7:30 a.m. James had already left for work without saying goodbye as usual. 3 years ago, this would have bothered her, but now it was just how things were. Elena took her tea to the window overlooking the sprawling garden of their mansion. Sometimes she still couldn't believe this was her life. 6 years ago, she'd been teaching 5-year-olds how to read in a small-town kindergarten, living in a tiny apartment above Mrs. Chen's flower shop. Now she was Mrs. Harrington, wife of James Harrington, the man whose technology company had changed how the world shared information, the man whose net worth had too many zeros for Elena to comprehend, the man who barely noticed her anymore. Her phone buzzed on the counter, probably her sister Lucia checking in, but when Elena picked it up, she saw James's name instead. A text, message, not a call. Of course. Important charity gala this Saturday. Confirmed will attend. Wear something appropriate. My assistant will send details. Elena sighed. Another night of standing beside James while he talked business with people, who looked through her as if she were made of glass. Another night of practiced smiles and polite nods while feeling like an imposter in designer clothes. She typed back a simple, "okay," and set her phone down. The house phone rang, making her jump. Nobody ever called that line except, "Mrs. Harrington? This is Priya from Mr. Harrington's office." "Hi, Priya," Elena said, trying to sound cheerful. She liked James's assistant. Priya was one of the few people who treated her like a real person. "I'm sending over the details for Saturday's gala. It's quite important. Raising money for education in underprivileged areas. Mr. Harrington is a major donor." "That sounds wonderful," Elena said, meaning it. Education was something she actually cared about. "Also," Priya lowered her voice, "I've taken the liberty of scheduling a stylist to visit tomorrow. The guest list includes several fashion photographers." "Oh." Elena touched her plain brown hair. "Thank you." After hanging up, Elena wandered into the music room. Like everything in this house, it was perfect and barely used. A grand piano sat in the corner, its polished surface free from dust thanks to the housekeepers who came every day. She sat on the bench and lifted the cover, revealing the keys beneath. Her fingers hovered over them, not quite touching. Elena hadn't played since moving here. James had bought this piano when they first married, after she'd mentioned once that she used to play as a child. "Do you still play?" he'd asked when the piano arrived. "Not really," she'd answered, too shy to admit she only knew a few simple tunes her grandmother had taught her. But she could sing. That was the secret she kept closest. In her grandmother's kitchen, in her classroom when the children were at recess, in the shower when no one could hear, Elena sang. She sang the songs her grandmother had taught her in Spanish, old folk songs about love and heartbreak and hope. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Lucia. "How's life among the rich and famous?" her sister teased when Elena answered. "Same, as always," Elena replied, closing the piano lid gently. "Big and empty. You could always come home for a visit," Lucia suggested. "Abuela asks about you all the time." "I know. I will soon." It was what Elena always said. But somehow soon never came. Home was a small town where everyone knew her as Elena Morales, the kindergarten teacher with the pretty voice, not as Mrs. Harrington, the billionaire's quiet wife. "James is taking me to a charity thing this weekend," Elena said, changing the subject. "For education. Will you have to make a speech?" Lucia knew how much Elena hated public attention. "No, thank goodness. I just have to stand there and look like I belong." After talking with her sister, Elena spent the day doing what she usually did, reading books, walking in the garden, and checking in with the housekeeper about dinner plans. James rarely made it home for dinner, but Elena always made sure something was prepared for him anyway. The next day, the stylist arrived with racks of dresses and boxes of shoes. Her name was Vivian, and she spoke rapidly as she held fabric against Elena's skin. This blue is divine with your complexion, she declared, setting aside a sparkly gown that made Elena feel anxious just looking at it. But perhaps too bold. You said you prefer something understated? Yes, please, Elena nodded. Something simple. Vivian frowned. Mrs. Harrington, this is a major event. Simple won't do. 2 hours later, Elena stood looking at her reflection. The dress was dark green, elegant but not flashy, with delicate beadwork around the neckline. It was beautiful, and yet Elena felt like she was looking at a stranger. Perfect, Vivian said, satisfied. Mr. Harrington will be pleased. Elena wasn't so sure. Would James even notice? Saturday arrived too quickly. Elena spent the morning with knots in her stomach, practicing small talk in her head. By evening, she was a bundle of nerves as she waited for James to come home to change. He arrived at 6:30, exactly 1 hour before they needed to leave. Efficiency was everything to James. Elena, he said, nodding as he walked into their bedroom. He looked tired, his tall frame slightly stooped from hours hunched over computers and conference tables. How was your day? She asked. The same question she always asked. Productive, he answered. The same reply he always gave. Then he paused, looking at her properly for the first time. You look nice. Thank you. Elena smoothed down the green dress, absurdly pleased by the small compliment. James disappeared into his closet, emerging minutes later in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. At 42, he was still handsome, with dark hair graying at the temples and intense eyes that had first drawn Elena to him when they'd met at a school fundraiser 6 years ago. Back then, those eyes had focused entirely on her when she spoke. Now they were always looking beyond her, at screens, at business opportunities, at the future he was building. Ready? He asked, checking his watch. The drive to the hotel was quiet. Elena watched the city lights flash by, remembering how excited she'd been the first time James had taken her to an event like this. She'd believed then that she would eventually fit into his world. Now she knew better. There will be some important people tonight, James said, breaking the silence. The governor, some major investors, a few celebrities supporting the cause. What's the cause again? Elena asked. James looked surprised by the question. Education technology for underfunded schools. My foundation is launching a new initiative. That's wonderful, Elena said, genuinely interested. Will the money go toward teacher training too, or just equipment? James blinked at her. I'm not sure. The team handles those details. Of course, Elena thought. The team, not James himself, and certainly not his wife. The car pulled up to the Yao Hotel, where photographers lined the entrance. Elena's stomach tightened. This was the part she hated most. Remember to smile, James said, straightening his bow tie. The door opened, and camera flashes exploded around them. James helped Elena out of the car, his hand firm on her elbow, guiding her forward. His public smile was in place, confident, successful, generous. Elena tried to match it with her own practiced expression. Mr. Harrington, over here. James, who designed your wife's dress? Can we get a statement about the new education initiative? James answered a few questions as they moved toward the entrance, his voice smooth and assured. Elena remained silent beside him, focusing on not tripping, in her heels. Inside, the ballroom was transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow prisms across white-clothed tables. Flowers adorned every surface, their sweet scent mixing with perfume and cologne. James! There you are! A tall woman in a red dress approached, air-kissing James's cheeks. We were just discussing the rollout timeline. Diane, James nodded. Have you met my wife, Elena? The woman's eyes flickered to Elena, then back to James. I don't believe I've had the pleasure. Lovely to meet you. Before Elena could respond, Diane had already pulled James into conversation about market projections and quarterly targets. Within minutes, they were surrounded by a small group of business types, all focused on James. Elena drifted slightly away, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. This was how these evenings always went. Soon, James would become so absorbed in networking that he'd forget she was there. Later, he'd find her when it was time to leave and apologize for getting caught up in things. She wandered toward a display explaining the education initiative. Pictures of children in classrooms smiled back at her, reminding her of her own students from what felt like a lifetime ago. She missed teaching, the small triumphs the finger paintings proudly presented, the moment when a child finally understood something they'd been struggling with. "They're doing good work," said a voice beside her. An older woman had appeared, elegant in a simple black dress. "Though I always wonder how much actually reaches the classrooms." "I was just thinking the same thing," Elena admitted. The woman studied her. "You're a teacher, aren't you?" "I can tell." Elena smiled, surprised. "I was kindergarten." "The most important year," the woman nodded. "I'm Rose Chen, by the way. I run the Foundation's outreach program." Elena Harrington. Recognition dawned in Rose's eyes. James Harrington's wife? I didn't realize that he was married to a kindergarten teacher? Elena finished with a small laugh. Most people don't. As they talked about education, Elena felt herself relaxing for the first time that evening. Rose understood the challenges teachers faced, the resources they needed beyond just computers and tablets. "You should come visit one of our pilot schools," Rose suggested. "We could use your perspective." Before Elena could answer, a flustered-looking young man approached them. He wore an event staff badge and seemed on the verge of panic. "Mrs. Chen, we have a situation. The singer, she's stuck in traffic. There's been an accident on the bridge and she won't make it in time for the program." Rose frowned. "That's unfortunate. The performance is meant to introduce the donation announcement." "I've called everyone," the young man continued. "No one can get here in the next hour." Rose sighed, then glanced at Elena thoughtfully. "You don't happen to sing, do you, Mrs. Harrington?" Elena's heart jumped to her throat. Well, yes, but not professionally or anything." Rose's eyes lit up. "Would you consider helping us out? It would just be one song before your husband's speech." Elena's mind raced. Sing? Here? In front of all these important people? In front of James? She hadn't sung in public since her grandmother's 70th birthday party, years ago. "I really don't think," she began. "Please," Rose said, touching her arm gently. "It would save the evening. And sometimes, Mrs. Harrington, we need to remind ourselves of who we really are." Elena looked across the room at James, deep in conversation, with people who mattered in his world. He hadn't looked for her once since they'd arrived. "Just one song?" she asked quietly. Rose nodded. "Just one. Whatever you're comfortable with." Taking a deep breath, Elena made a decision that would change everything. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." Rose led Elena through a side door, away from the glittering ballroom filled with wealthy donors and business executives. The hallway was quiet, a stark contrast to the buzz of conversation and clinking glasses they left behind. "We have about 20 minutes before the program starts," Rose explained, walking briskly. "What song do you have in mind?" Elena's mind went blank. She hadn't thought that far ahead. What could she possibly sing that would fit this fancy event? These people were used to professional performers, not a kindergarten teacher who sang to her students. "I'm not sure," she admitted, her confidence already fading. "Maybe this isn't a good idea after all." Rose stopped and turned to face her. The older woman's expression was kind but determined. "Elena, I've organized hundreds of these events. Do you know what they all have in common? Nobody remembers them. It's all just polite applause and open checkbooks." She took Elena's hands, in hers. "But I have a feeling you could make this one different." Elena swallowed hard. "I know some old Spanish songs my grandmother taught me, and a few more modern ones." "Perfect," Rose nodded. "Something meaningful to you will be more powerful than any technically perfect performance." They reached a small room that served as a makeshift staging area. A young woman with a clipboard hurried over to them. "This is Zoe, our event coordinator," Rose introduced. "Zoe, this is Elena Harrington. She's going to save our program tonight." Zoe's eyes widened. Mrs. Harrington? As in James Harrington's wife? I had no idea you were a singer. I'm not, Elena said quickly. Not really, She's being modest. Rose cut in smoothly. Elena has graciously agreed to perform in place of our scheduled artist. Zoe looked relieved. That's wonderful. I'll let the tech team know. Do you need any special arrangements? Background music? Elena thought about it. Just a simple piano accompaniment if possible. Nothing fancy. Our pianist is excellent, Zoe assured her. If you can hum the melody or give him the name of the song, he can follow along. While Zoe went to inform the technical team, Rose guided Elena to a small dressing room nearby. You might want to freshen up, she suggested. The stage lights can be warm. Left alone, Elena stared at her reflection in the lighted mirror. What was she thinking, agreeing to this? James would be shocked, maybe even embarrassed. He had never heard her sing. In their 6 years together, that part of herself had remained private, a small piece of the old Elena that she'd kept hidden away. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Zoe entered, carrying a garment bag. I thought you might want to wear this, she said, unzipping the bag to reveal a simple black dress with subtle silver threads woven through the fabric. Our performer left it here last week after a dress rehearsal. It might be more comfortable for performing than what you're wearing. The green dress Elena had on was beautiful but restrictive. She couldn't take a deep breath in it, which wasn't ideal for singing. Thank you, she said, accepting the offering. Once alone again, Elena changed into the black dress. It fit surprisingly well, flowing around her like water when she moved. The material was light and airy, allowing her to breathe freely. She looked different somehow, less like James Harrington's proper wife and more like herself. Another knock, more urgent this time. 5 minutes, Mrs. Harrington, Zoe called through the door. Elena's heart began to race. 5 minutes until she would stand in front of hundreds of wealthy, influential people. 5 minutes until she would reveal a part of herself that even her husband didn't know existed. She closed her eyes and thought of her grandmother's kitchen, warm and smelling of cinnamon, where she had first learned to sing. The memory calmed her, bringing back the joy that singing had always given her before. It became her secret. With one last look in the mirror, Elena left the dressing room. Rose was waiting for her, eyebrows rising appreciatively at the dress change. Much better, she approved. You look like yourself now. They walked together toward the stage area. Through a gap in the curtains, Elena could see the ballroom, now, arranged with all the guests seated at their tables. The stage lights were bright, making it hard to see specific faces, but she knew James would be at the front, probably checking his phone under the table. What will you sing? Rose whispered as they waited for the current speaker to finish. Elena thought of her life these past few years, the loneliness, the distance between her and James, the parts of herself she had tucked away to fit into his world, and she thought of who she used to be before. Gracias a la vida, she decided. It means thanks to life. My grandmother loved it. Rose squeezed her arm encouragingly. Perfect. The speaker at the podium was wrapping up. And now, before we hear from our primary benefactor, James Harrington, we have a special musical performance. Please welcome to the stage. There was a moment of confusion as Zoe hurriedly whispered in the speaker's ear. Elena Harrington, the speaker announced, sounding surprised himself. A murmur went through the audience. Elena heard the whispers. Harrington? Is she related to James? I didn't know his wife was a performer. This wasn't in the program. She stepped onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinding her. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out the faces at the nearest tables. Most were strangers, but there, at a table right in front, sat James, his expression a mixture of confusion and alarm as he recognized her. Elena forced herself to look away from him and toward the pianist, a middle-aged man with kind eyes. She whispered the name of the song, and relief washed over his face. He knew it. She hummed a few bars to confirm the key, and he nodded, positioning his hands over the keys. The room fell silent. everyone waiting. Elena took a deep breath. The pianist began playing the gentle, rolling introduction to the song. The familiar melody wrapped around Elena like an old friend, carrying her back to her grandmother's kitchen, to her roots, to the person she had been before becoming Mrs. Harrington. And then she began to sing. Her voice started soft, almost hesitant, but grew stronger with each note. The Spanish lyrics flowed from her lips naturally, telling of gratitude for the gifts of life, for sight, hearing, laughter, tears, the path walked. She forgot about the audience, forgot about James, forgot about the charity gala. There was only the song, only the music rising and falling with her breath. Her voice filled the ballroom, clear and true, carrying emotion that needed no translation. As she reached the chorus, Elena opened her eyes, not realizing she had closed them. The room was completely still. Every face was turned toward her, many showing surprise. Others moved to tears by the raw emotion in her voice. And there was James, sitting motionless, his phone forgotten on the table, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. His usual mask of polite interest was gone, replaced by genuine astonishment. For once he wasn't looking past her but directly at her, really seeing her. The song built to its climax, Elena's voice soaring with the gratitude expressed in the lyrics, thanks to life, which had given her so much. As she sang the final notes, her eyes locked with James's across the room. In that moment something passed between them, a recognition of how much had been left unspoken. The last note hung in the air for a heartbeat, then two. Complete silence followed. Then the room erupted. People rose to their feet, applause thundering through the ballroom. Elena stood frozen, overwhelmed by the response. She had expected polite clapping at best, embarrassed silence at worst. Not this standing ovation, not the tears she could see on some faces. Rose appeared at her side, beaming. "I told you," she whispered, guiding Elena to take a small bow. As she straightened, Elena found James again in the crowd. He remained seated while those around him stood, his expression unreadable now. Was he angry? Embarrassed? Proud? She couldn't tell. The applause continued as Elena made her way off the stage on shaky legs. Zoe was waiting in the wings, her clipboard forgotten at her side. "That was incredible," she breathed. "I've never heard anything like it. So much feeling." Elena barely heard her. Her heart was pounding, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had done it, revealed her hidden self in the most public way possible. There was no going back now. Rose guided her to a quiet corner, backstage. "Take a moment," she advised. "That kind of performance takes a lot out of you." Elena nodded gratefully, sinking into a chair. Through the curtain, she could hear the master of ceremonies retaking the stage, his voice enthusiastic as he introduced James as the next speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the man behind tonight's initiative, Mr. James Harrington." More applause, though not as thunderous as what Elena had received. She held her breath, wondering what James would say, how he would acknowledge, or ignore, what had just happened. "Thank you," came James's voice, controlled as always. "Before I speak about our education initiative, I want to thank my wife for that unexpected performance." There was a pause, and Elena could picture him adjusting his tie, gathering his thoughts. "In business," he continued, "we talk a lot about hidden potential and untapped resources. It seems I've been guilty of overlooking both in my own home." A ripple of appreciative laughter went through the audience. Elena's eyes widened. Was that a joke? From James? She stood up, moving closer to the curtain to peer through a small gap. James stood at the podium, looking more human somehow, less like the polished business figure she was used to seeing at these events. "Now, about why we're all here tonight," he said, shifting to his prepared remarks. Elena let the curtain fall, closed. Whatever would happen between them would have to wait until they were alone, but something had changed tonight. In her, in him, in the careful balance of their marriage. And as she listened to James talking passionately about bringing quality education to underprivileged children, Elena realized that perhaps there were parts of him she hadn't seen either, hidden beneath his businessman exterior. Tonight they had both revealed something true. Elena stood backstage, her heart still racing from the performance. The black dress felt like a second skin now, as if she'd stepped into a new version of herself. Through the curtain, she could hear James finishing his speech about the education initiative, his voice steady and professional as always. She wasn't sure what would happen next. Would he be angry that she'd surprised him? Embarrassed that his quiet wife had suddenly become the center of attention? Or maybe, just maybe, proud? That was truly remarkable, Rose said, appearing at her side with a glass of water. Here, you must be thirsty. Elena accepted the water gratefully, suddenly aware of how dry her throat felt. Thank you. I still can't believe I did that. Well, everyone out there believes it now, Rose smiled. They're already asking who you are, where you've performed before. Nowhere, Elena laughed softly. Just my grandmother's kitchen and my classroom when the children were at recess. Rose shook her head in wonder. Some talents can't be hidden forever, no matter how hard we try. She glanced toward the stage. Your husband's speech is ending. Would you like to slip away, or? The question hung in the air. Elena considered it for a moment. The old Elena, the one who had walked into the gala earlier that evening, would have chosen to disappear to avoid the attention and the inevitable questions. But the woman who had just stood on stage and bared her soul through song felt different. I'll stay, she decided. Applause signaled the end of James's speech. Moments later, he appeared backstage, moving with purpose through the small crowd of event staff. His eyes scanned the area until they found Elena. She straightened her shoulders, preparing herself for whatever came next. James stopped a few feet away from her, his expression a mixture of confusion and something else she couldn't quite read. Elena, he said, his voice lower than usual. Before he could continue, they were interrupted by a tall man in an expensive suit who clapped James enthusiastically on the shoulder. Brilliant speech, Harrington. And what a surprise from your wife. You never told us she was so talented. James cleared his throat. Thank you, Congressman. I was just as surprised as everyone else. The congressman turned to Elena, extending his hand. Mrs. Harrington, your performance was extraordinary. Such emotion. I haven't been moved like that at one of these events in years. More people appeared, surrounding them, all wanting to speak to Elena. Questions came from all directions. Where did you train? Do you perform professionally? Was that Spanish? What was the song about? Elena answered as best she could, feeling James's eyes on her. The whole time, he stood slightly apart, watching as his wife, usually invisible at these functions, became the star of the evening. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Rose appeared and deftly extracted them from the crowd. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington need a moment, she announced firmly, guiding them to a private room off the main corridor. I'll make sure you're not disturbed. The door closed behind her, leaving Elena and James alone for the first time since her performance. The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken words. James loosened his bow tie slightly, a rare sign of him being less than perfectly composed. You never told me you could sing like that, he finally said. Elena met his gaze. You never asked. The simplicity of her answer seemed to hit him hard. He blinked, then moved to the small sofa against the wall, sitting down heavily. No, he admitted. I suppose I didn't. Elena remained standing, her fingers tracing the silver threads in the black dress. Are you angry? Angry? James looked genuinely surprised by the question. Why would I be angry? I don't know. For surprising you, for drawing attention. He shook his head slowly. I'm not angry, Elena. He paused, seemingly searching for the right word. I'm ashamed. Now it was Elena's turn to be surprised. In 6 years of marriage, she had never heard James express shame about anything. Why? She asked softly. Because I didn't know. He looked up at her, his eyes troubled. I didn't know my own wife had such an extraordinary talent. What else don't I know about you? The question hung between them, bigger than just her singing. What else had they missed about each other in the years they'd been drifting apart? Elena moved to sit beside him on the sofa, careful to leave space between them. I used to sing all the time before we met. My grandmother taught me. It was part of who I was. And then you stopped? When you married me? She considered. This. Not exactly, I still sang, but privately, it just didn't seem to fit into your world. My world, James repeated, a note of bitterness in his voice. You make it sound like a different planet. Sometimes it feels that way, Elena admitted. The galas, the business meetings, the people who look through me like I'm not even there. James winced. I never realized you felt that way. You never asked, she said again, but gently this time. A knock at the door interrupted them. Zoe poked her head in. Sorry to disturb you, but people are asking for both of you. The donation announcements are about to begin, and several major donors want to speak with Mrs. Harrington specifically. James stood up, automatically straightening his tie and jacket. The businessman mask was sliding back into place. We'll be right there. When Zoe left, he turned to Elena. We should go back out. People are waiting. Elena nodded, standing up, as well. As they moved toward the door, James hesitated, then reached for her hand, something he rarely did at public events. That song, he said. What was it about? Elena smiled, surprised and touched by his interest. It's called Gracias a la vida, thanks to life. It's about being grateful for everything life gives us, the good and the bad. My grandmother used to sing it while she cooked. James nodded thoughtfully. It was beautiful. You were beautiful. The compliment, so simple and sincere, warmed her more than any expensive gift he had ever given her. They returned to the ballroom. Together, James's hand still holding hers. The room looked different somehow. Or perhaps it was Elena who had changed. People who had previously looked through her now smiled in recognition. Several approached to compliment her performance, speaking to her directly rather than addressing James as they usually did. As they made their way to their table, Elena noticed a distinguished-looking man watching her intently. James followed, her gaze. That's Anthony Reynolds, he said quietly. He owns the biggest recording studio in the city. Before Elena could respond, Anthony approached them, introducing himself to Elena with genuine respect in his voice. Mrs. Harrington, your performance was extraordinary. The raw emotion you conveyed. He shook his head in admiration. May I ask if you've ever considered recording? Elena laughed, caught off guard. Oh no, I'm not a professional singer. Could have fooled me, Anthony said. And everyone else in this room. He pulled a business card from his pocket. If you ever change your mind, I'd be honored to discuss the possibilities. James accepted the card for her, a strange expression crossing his face. Pride mixed with something that looked almost like worry. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Elena found herself the center of attention for the first time at one of these events, with James watching from the sidelines as she answered questions about her background, her musical influences, her unexpected talent. When they finally left, well past midnight, the night air felt cool on Elena's flushed skin. Their driver held the car door open, and James waited for her to slide in first before joining her in the back seat. As the car pulled away from the hotel, silence settled between them again. But it was a different kind of silence. Expectant, rather, than empty. Your phone has been buzzing, Elena noted, nodding toward the device in James's pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Emails, messages, social media alerts. Business as usual, she said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. The evening's magic was fading already. Not usual at all, James replied, turning the screen to show her. You're trending. Elena stared at the phone in disbelief. The screen showed a social media post with a video clip of her performance, already with thousands of views and comments. The caption read, Billionaire's simple wife stuns crowd with soul-stirring performance. Someone recorded it? She whispered, shocked. Several people, it seems. James scrolled through more posts. You've become an overnight sensation, Elena. She shook her head, trying to process this new development. But I just sang one song. One song was enough, James said, his voice soft. He set the phone down between them, the screen still glowing with notifications. Everything can change with one moment, one decision. Elena looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. When she'd woken up that morning, she had been invisible, James Harrington's quiet wife, the former kindergarten teacher who had married into a world too big for her. Now, hours later, she had revealed a part of herself she'd kept hidden for years, and people had responded in ways she never could have imagined. What happens now? She asked, not sure if she was asking about the video, the sudden attention, or their marriage. James looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. I don't know, he admitted, but I'd like to find out. Together. He reached across the seat and took her hand, his fingers warm against hers. It was a small gesture, but in it, Elena felt the possibility of something new beginning between them. As the car carried them home through the quiet streets, Elena realized that she'd done more than just sing tonight. She'd found her voice in more ways than one. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom curtains. For a moment she lay still, wondering if last night had been a dream. But the black dress with silver threads draped over a nearby chair confirmed it had all been real. The song, the applause, James's stunned expression. She turned to his side of the bed, expecting to find it empty as usual. To her surprise, James was there, watching her with curious eyes. You didn't go to work, she said, her voice still husky from sleep. I canceled my morning meetings. He propped himself up on one elbow. First time in I can't remember how long. Neither could Elena. For years, James had been up and gone before dawn, returning long after dinner. His presence now in the soft morning light felt almost strange. How are you feeling? He asked. Elena considered the question. Different, she finally said. Like something that was locked up inside me broke free. James nodded slowly. You were extraordinary last night. I've never heard anything like it. Before Elena could respond, her phone chimed from the bedside table. Then again, and again. That's been happening all morning, James said. Your sister called 3 times, and my assistant says the charity organizers want to speak with you. Elena reached for her phone, scrolling through dozens of notifications. Messages from old friends who had seen the video, social media alerts, even emails from people she didn't know. And there, a text from Lucia. When were you going to tell me you're famous? Call me now. I don't understand, Elena murmured. It was just one song. James picked up his own phone, pulling up a video. Someone posted this last night. It already has over 1 million views. He handed her the phone. On the screen was Elena in the black dress, singing with her eyes closed, lost in the music. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the raw emotion there, then panned to the audience's mesmerized expressions. And there, in the front row, was James, the usually composed businessman looking completely thunderstruck. The comments below the video were overwhelming. Who is she? That voice, the way her billionaire husband looks at her, like he's seeing her for the first time. This is what real talent looks like. No auto-tune, no gimmicks, just pure emotion. Elena handed the phone back, feeling dizzy. This is a lot. James set the phone aside. Are you sorry it happened? No, she said immediately, surprising herself with her certainty. No, I'm not sorry. He smiled slightly. Good, because there's something else. He reached for a newspaper on his nightstand, an actual physical paper, something James rarely bothered with in the digital age. The headline on the entertainment page read, Mystery Singer Steals Show at Charity Gala. Billionaire's Wife Reveals Hidden Talent. There was a photo of Elena leaving the hotel, James's hand at the small of her back, both of them looking slightly dazed. The press is asking for interviews, James said. The charity wants you to perform at their next event. And Anthony Reynolds, the recording studio owner, called me personally this morning. Elena sat up, pulling the blanket around her. What did he want? To talk about recording that song, and others if you have them. James watched her carefully. Do you have others? She nodded. A few. Songs my grandmother taught me, mostly. A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable but full of unspoken questions. What do you want to do? James finally asked. A knock at the door interrupted them. Zoe poked her head in. Sorry to disturb you, but people are asking for both of you. The donation announcements are about to begin, and several major donors want to speak with Mrs. Harrington specifically. James stood up, automatically straightening his tie and jacket. The businessman mask was sliding back into place. We'll be right there. When Zoe left, he turned to Elena. We should go back out. People are waiting. Elena nodded, standing up. As well. As they moved toward the door, James hesitated, then reached for her hand, something he rarely did at public events. That song, he said. What was it about? Elena smiled, surprised and touched by his interest. It's called Gracias, a la vida, thanks to life. It's about being grateful for everything life gives us, the good and the bad. My grandmother used to sing it while she cooked. James nodded thoughtfully. It was beautiful. You were beautiful. The compliment, so simple and sincere, warmed her more than any expensive gift he had ever given her. They returned to the ballroom. Together, James's hand still holding hers. The room looked different somehow, or perhaps it was Elena who had changed. People who had previously looked through her now smiled in recognition. Several approached to compliment her performance, speaking to her directly, rather than addressing James as they usually did. As they made their way to their table, Elena noticed a distinguished-looking man watching her intently. James followed, her gaze. That's Anthony Reynolds, he said quietly. He owns the biggest recording studio in the city. Before Elena could respond, Anthony approached them, introducing himself to Elena with genuine respect in his voice. Mrs. Harrington, your performance was extraordinary. The raw emotion you conveyed. He shook his head in admiration. May I ask if you've ever considered recording? Elena laughed, caught off guard. Oh no, I'm not a professional singer. Could have fooled me, Anthony said, and everyone else in this room. He pulled a business card from his pocket. If you ever change your mind, I'd be honored to discuss the possibilities. James accepted the card for her, a strange expression crossing his face. Pride mixed with something that looked almost like worry. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Elena found herself the center of attention for the first time at one of these events, with James watching from the sidelines as she answered questions about her background, her musical influences, her unexpected talent. When they finally left, well past midnight, the night air felt cool on Elena's flushed skin. Their driver held the car door open, and James waited for her to slide in first before joining her in the back seat. As the car pulled away from the hotel, silence settled between them again. But it was a different kind of silence. Expectant, rather, than empty. Your phone has been buzzing, Elena noted, nodding toward the device in James's pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Emails, messages, social media alerts. Business as usual, she said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. The evening's magic was fading already. Not usual at all, James replied, turning the screen to show her. You're trending. Elena stared at the phone in disbelief. The screen showed a social media post with a video clip of her performance, already with thousands of views and comments. The caption read, Billionaire's simple wife stuns crowd with soul-stirring performance. Someone recorded it, she whispered, shocked. Several people, it seems. James scrolled through more posts. You've become an overnight sensation, Elena. She shook her head, trying to process this new development. But I just sang one song. One song was enough, James said, his voice soft. He set the phone down between them, the screen still glowing with notifications. Everything can change with one moment, one decision. Elena looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. When she'd woken up that morning, she had been invisible, James Harrington's quiet wife, the former kindergarten teacher who had married into a world too big for her. Now, hours later, she had revealed a part of herself she'd kept hidden for years, and people had responded in ways she never could have imagined. "What happens now?" she asked, not sure if she was asking about the video, the sudden attention, or their marriage. James looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'd like to find out. Together." He reached across the seat and took her hand, his fingers warm against hers. It was a small gesture, but in it, Elena felt the possibility of something new beginning between them. As the car carried them home through the quiet streets, Elena realized that she'd done more than just sing tonight. She'd found her voice in more ways than one. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom curtains. For a moment she lay still, wondering if last night had been a dream. But the black dress with silver threads draped over a nearby chair confirmed it had all been real. The song, the applause, James's stunned expression. She turned to his side of the bed, expecting to find it empty as usual. To her surprise, James was there, watching her with curious eyes. "You didn't go to work," she said, her voice still husky from sleep. "I canceled my morning meetings." He propped himself up on one elbow. "First time in... I can't remember how long." Neither could Elena. For years, James had been up and gone before dawn, returning long after dinner. His presence now in the soft morning light felt almost strange. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Elena considered the question. "Different," she finally said. "Like something that was locked up inside me broke free." James nodded slowly. "You were extraordinary last night. I've never heard anything like it." Before Elena could respond, her phone chimed from the bedside table. Then again, and again. "That's been happening all morning," James said. "Your sister called 3 times, and my assistant says the charity organizers want to speak with you." Elena reached for her phone, scrolling through dozens of notifications. Messages from old friends who had seen the video, social media alerts, even emails from people she didn't know. And there, a text from Lucia. "When were you going to tell me you're famous? Call me now." "I don't understand," Elena murmured. "It was just one song." James picked up his own phone, pulling up a video. "Someone posted this last night. It already has over 1 million views." He handed her the phone. On the screen was Elena in the black dress, singing with her eyes closed, lost in the music. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the raw emotion there, then panned to the audience's mesmerized expressions. And there, in the front row, was James, the usually composed businessman, looking completely thunderstruck. The comments below the video were overwhelming. Who is she? That voice. The way her billionaire husband looks at her, like he's seeing her for the first time. This is what real talent looks like. No auto-tune, no gimmicks, just pure emotion. Elena handed the phone back, feeling dizzy. "This is a lot." James set the phone aside. "Are you sorry it happened?" "No," she said immediately, surprising herself with her certainty. "No, I'm not sorry." He smiled slightly. "Good, because there's something else." He reached for a newspaper on his nightstand. An actual physical paper, something James rarely bothered with in the digital age. The headline on the entertainment page read, "Mystery singer steals show at charity gala. Billionaire's wife reveals hidden talent." There was a photo of Elena leaving the hotel, James's hand at the small of her back, both of them looking slightly dazed. "The press is asking for interviews," James said. "The charity wants you to perform at their next event. And Anthony Reynolds, the recording studio owner, called me personally this morning." Elena sat up, pulling the blanket around her. "What did he want?" "To talk about recording that song. And others, if you have them." James watched her carefully. "Do you? Have others?" She nodded. "A few. Songs my grandmother taught me mostly." A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable but full of unspoken questions. "What do you want to do?" James finally asked. It was such a simple question, But Elena realized no one had asked her that in a very long time. What did she want? For years, she had adjusted her life to fit around James's, his schedule, his world, his needs. She had made herself small, tucking away her own desires until she almost forgot what they were. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I never imagined anything like this." James surprised her by taking her hand. "You don't have to decide everything today, but whatever you choose, I'll support you." His phone rang, breaking the moment. Elena expected him to answer immediately as he always did, but instead he checked the screen and set it aside. "Work can wait," he said, noticing her surprise. "I'm taking the day off." "You? Taking a day off?" Elena couldn't hide her shock. "Who are you, and what have you done with my husband?" James laughed, a real laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I deserve that, but after last night, I realized some things are more important than checking emails every 5 minutes." They spent the morning talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Over breakfast on the terrace, James asked about her singing, about her grandmother, about the life she'd had before they met. Elena found herself sharing stories she had never told him, about growing up in her small town, about teaching kindergarten, about the dreams she had set aside. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" James asked as they walked through the garden later, the sun high overhead. Elena considered this. "At first I was just nervous, I guess. You were so successful, so confident. I felt small by comparison." She stopped to touch a blooming rose. "And then, as time went on, it seemed like you were less and less interested in knowing me. You were always working, always distracted." James winced. "I didn't realize how much I'd shut you out." "We both pulled away," Elena admitted. "I stopped trying to share things with you because I thought you didn't care." "I did care," James said quietly. "I do care. I just got lost in everything else." Around noon, the doorbell rang. Elena was surprised to see Rose Chen on their doorstep, smiling warmly. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said. "But after last night, I wanted to talk to you both. Personally." James invited her in, offering coffee in the sunroom, another first. Usually he directed all visitors to his home office, keeping them separate from the personal spaces of the house. "Elena, your performance has generated more donations than any event we've held," Rose said once they were settled. "People are still calling this morning wanting to contribute." "That's wonderful," Elena said, genuinely pleased. "It's more than wonderful. It's unprecedented." Rose set her coffee cup down. "The foundation would like to offer you a role as our cultural ambassador. We've been trying to develop a music program for underserved schools, and your background in education combined with your obvious talent would be perfect." Elena blinked in surprise. "You want me to work for the foundation?" "If you're interested." Rose nodded. "It would involve visiting schools, helping develop the program, perhaps performing occasionally at events." She glanced at James. "I've already discussed it briefly with your husband, and he seems supportive." Elena turned to James, who nodded. "It's your decision," he said, "but I think you'd be amazing at it." The old Elena would have hesitated, would have worried about embarrassing James or stepping too far out of her comfort zone. But the woman who had stood on that stage last night felt different, stronger, more certain of herself. "I'd like to learn more about it," she told Rose. After Rose left, promising to send more details, Elena and James sat together in the garden. The day had turned warm, the sky a clear, perfect blue. "You'd be good at it," James said. "The foundation role. You understand education, and after last night, it's clear you understand the power of music." "Maybe," Elena agreed. "It would be nice to be back in classrooms again, to work with children." She looked at him curiously. "Would it bother you, having your wife working instead of just being Mrs. Harrington's social accessory?" James flinched at her description. "Is that how you see yourself? As an accessory?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "At your events, when people look through me or only talk to me to get to you. I never wanted you to feel that way." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. I guess I just assumed you were happy with how things were. I never asked. And I never told you, Elena acknowledged. We both stopped communicating somewhere along the way. Their conversation was interrupted by Elena's phone ringing. It was Lucia, demanding to know everything about last night. Elena put the call on speaker so James could hear her sister's excited questions. Is it true you're famous now? Lucia asked. Abuela saw the video and she's telling everyone in town that her granddaughter is a star. Elena laughed. I'm not a star, Lucia. I just sang one song. One song that's gone viral. Even Jorge at the grocery store has seen it. As Lucia chattered on, Elena caught James watching her, a thoughtful expression on his face. When the call ended, he asked, When was the last time you visited your family? Elena had to think about. That was 2 years ago, maybe more. Too long, James decided. Let's go this weekend. What, really? Elena couldn't hide her surprise. James had always been too busy for family visits. Really? He nodded firmly. I want to meet this grandmother who taught you to sing like that, and I want to see where you came from, the place that shaped you. As the afternoon stretched into evening, they ordered takeout, another break from routine, and sat on the terrace watching the sunset. James's phone rang several times, but he let it go to voicemail. His attention focused on Elena instead. Anthony Reynolds called again, he mentioned as they finished dinner. He's quite persistent. Elena set down her fork. What do you think I should do about that? It's not about what I think, James said carefully. It's about what you want. Do you want to record your songs? Share them with more people? I'm not sure, she admitted. The thought is both exciting and terrifying. You don't have to decide now, James reminded her. But if you want to explore it, even just to see what it would be like. Elena nodded slowly. Maybe I could talk to him at least. As darkness fell, they moved inside. James built a fire in the living room fireplace, something they hadn't done in ages, and they sat together on the couch, the flames casting warm light over them. Sing for me, James said suddenly. Just for me this time. Elena hesitated only for a moment before beginning a soft lullaby, one her grandmother had sung to her as a child. Her voice filled their living room, turning the large, often empty, house into something that felt for the first time in years like a home. When she finished, James was looking at her with wonder in his eyes. I can't believe I never knew this part of you existed, he said. What else have I missed? We have time to find out, Elena said, surprised by her own optimism. If you want to. I do, James said, taking her hand. I really do. That night, as they prepared for bed, Elena looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked different somehow, more alive, more herself. One song had changed everything, bringing her hidden self into the light and opening a door to a new chapter in her life. And as she joined James in bed, she realized that maybe it had changed him too. For the first time in years, he set his phone aside without checking it one last time, turning to her instead. Good night, Elena, he said softly. Thank you for showing me what I've been missing. 6 months had passed since the night Elena sang at the charity gala. The maple trees outside the elementary school classroom were turning golden, their leaves drifting down to create a colorful carpet on the playground. Inside, 25 children sat in a semicircle on a colorful rug, their eyes fixed on Elena, as she strummed a simple melody on a guitar. Music helps us express our feelings, she explained, her voice gentle but confident, even when we don't have the words to say what's in our hearts. A small girl with braids raised her hand. Ms. Elena, is it true you're famous? My mom showed me your video. Elena laughed, still not used to being recognized. I'm not famous, Lily. I just sang a song that made people feel something. Can we hear it? Asked a boy in the back row. Before Elena could answer, the classroom door opened. The children turned as one, their eyes widening at the tall man in a casual sweater and jeans who entered. Some recognized him from news photos or magazine covers. Mr. Harrington, the teacher exclaimed. We weren't expecting you until later. James smiled, more relaxed than he would have been 6 months ago. I finished my meeting early. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Elena said, her face brightening at the sight of her husband. The children were just asking to hear the famous song. Then I'm right on time, James said, taking a seat at the back of the classroom. I never get tired of hearing it. Elena adjusted her guitar, suddenly feeling that familiar flutter of nerves. Even after performing at a dozen school events and recording the song in Anthony Reynolds' studio, singing in front of James still gave her butterflies. But as she began the familiar melody of Gracias a la vida, the nerves melted away. The children watched, mesmerized as Elena sang. Some closed their eyes, swaying to the music. Others watched her fingers on the guitar strings, fascination on their young faces. When she finished, the classroom erupted in applause, not the thunderous ovation of the gala, but something equally meaningful, the pure, unfiltered appreciation of children. That was beautiful, the teacher said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. Thank you for sharing your gift with us, Ms. Elena. As the children returned to their desks, Elena packed up her guitar. This visit was part of her new role as Cultural Ambassador for the Education Foundation, a position she had accepted 3 weeks after the gala. Twice a week, she visited different schools in underprivileged areas, bringing music to classrooms that had lost their arts funding. James approached, helping her with her guitar case. You were wonderful, he said, kissing her cheek lightly. Those kids adore you. It feels good to be in a classroom again, Elena admitted. I miss teaching more than I realized. They walked together through the school hallway, stopping to admire artwork displayed on bulletin boards. This was their new routine. James would arrange his schedule to join Elena for at least one school visit each week, then they would have lunch together afterward. Outside, autumn sunshine warmed the crisp air. They strolled toward a small cafe across from the school, where they had become regular customers. How was your meeting? Elena asked as they waited to cross the street. Productive, James replied, but then he smiled. But I couldn't stop checking, the time knowing I'd be seeing you. Elena squeezed his hand, still surprised sometimes by these small affections that had become part of their renewed relationship. At the cafe, they took their usual corner table. The owner, Dina, waved from behind the counter, already preparing their usual orders. Black coffee for James, herbal tea for Elena. I got a call from Anthony this morning, Elena said as they settled in. The song has been streamed over 3 million times now. James nodded, unsurprised. People connect with it. With you. After weeks of consideration, Elena had agreed to record Gracias a la Vida at Anthony's studio. She had been clear from the start. She wasn't looking for a music career, just a way to share the song that meant so much to her. The proceeds went to the Education Foundation, funding music programs in schools that couldn't afford them. Rose called too, Elena continued. The spring benefit is coming up, and she wants me to perform again. Are you going to do it? Elena stirred honey into her tea, considering. I think so. It feels right somehow. Full circle. James watched her, still sometimes amazed by the transformation in his wife, or rather the revelation of who she had been all along, beneath the quiet exterior. I have news too, he said. The board approved my proposal. We're restructuring the company leadership. Elena looked up, her eyes widening. They said yes to everything. James nodded. Starting next month, I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. I'll still be involved in major decisions, but Miguel will take over as CEO. How do you feel about it? Elena asked. She knew this decision hadn't come easily for James, who had built his company from nothing. Lighter, he admitted. Like I've set down something heavy I've been carrying for too long. He reached for her hand across the table. I want more time for what matters, for us, for the foundation work, for visiting your family. Their weekend trip to Elena's hometown had turned into a 2-week stay. James had been fascinated by her grandmother, Abuela Sofia, who at 83 still had a voice that could fill a room. He'd sat in her kitchen for hours, listening to her stories and watching her teach Elena songs from her youth. The visit had changed something in James. Seeing Elena surrounded by people who knew her, really knew her, had made him realize how much of her he had missed during their years together. Abuela called yesterday, Elena said, smiling at the memory of how her grandmother and husband had bonded. She wants to know when we're visiting again. She says you promised to help her fix the porch swing. James laughed. I did. Maybe for Christmas? We could stay through New Year's this time. The idea of spending the holidays away from the city, from business obligations and social appearances, would have been unthinkable to the old James. But, like Elena, he had changed over these past months, rediscovering parts of himself he had set aside in pursuit of success. After lunch, they walked to the nearby park, something they often did now, taking time to simply be together, without distractions or obligations pressing in on them. I met with the architects yesterday, James said as they followed a path through trees aflame with fall colors. The renovations for the music center should be finished by spring. The music center had been James's idea, a place where children from across the city could come for free music lessons. It would be housed in a building his company owned, repurposed with practice rooms, a small performance space, and classrooms. What did they say about the recording studio? Elena asked. It's included in the plans. Anthony's helping design it. James squeezed her hand. He still thinks you should record more songs, you know. Elena smiled. One step at a time. I'm still getting used to hearing my voice on the radio. They stopped at a bench overlooking a small pond. 6 months ago, they would have been checking emails on their phones or, more likely, not sitting in a park together at all. Now they simply sat in comfortable silence, watching ducks glide across the water. Do you ever think about that night? James asked suddenly. How different things might be if you hadn't gotten up on that stage. Elena leaned against his shoulder. Sometimes, but I think we would have found our way back to each other somehow. I'm not so sure, James admitted. I was so lost in my own world. If you hadn't shocked me out of it. Well, I did, Elena said simply. And here we are. Here we are, James agreed, his arm around her shoulders. That evening, they hosted a dinner at their home, something that would have been rare in the past but had become a regular occurrence. Rose was there, along with Miguel and his wife, Anthony and his partner, and several teachers from the schools Elena had visited. Their house, once a showcase that had felt more like a hotel than a home, had transformed over the months. There were now family photos on the walls, books left open on side tables, and Elena's guitar in a stand by the window, signs of a space that was lived in, not just occupied. After dinner, the conversation flowed easily around the table. James, once so formal with anyone outside his business circle, laughed openly at Anthony's music industry stories. Elena, once so quiet at social gatherings, shared animated tales of her classroom visits. I propose a toast, Rose said, raising her glass. To new beginnings and hidden talents. Everyone lifted their glasses. Under the table, James took Elena's hand. Later, after their guests had gone, they stood together on the terrace, looking out at the city lights. The night was cool, but not cold, stars visible above the urban glow. Sing for me? James asked, as he often did now in these quiet moments. Elena leaned against the railing, looking at the man beside her. Still recognizably the successful, driven James Harrington, but softer now, more present, more hers. She began to sing, her voice carrying into the night. It was a new song, one she had been working on herself, about finding your way back to what matters. James closed his eyes, listening with a smile on his face. When she finished, he opened his eyes. I love you, he said. Not just your voice or your talent, but all of you. The parts I knew and the parts I'm still discovering. I love you too, Elena replied. The you that you were, and the you that you're becoming. They stood together under the stars, a simple woman who had found her voice, and a billionaire who had found his heart, their future stretching before them like a song waiting to be sung.